Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoteric series on the MiSTer FPGA DE10 Nano project. It's the last Thursday of the month of November. The month has flown by, and you know what time it is. It's time for the MiSTer Monthly News Roundup. Now, I'm going to keep this one a little bit short today because it is Thanksgiving in the US, so you probably already have the turkey in the oven. You might be a few drinks deep, and you're probably thinking about which relative you're going to start a fight with first. And if you're not in the US, it's probably just a work day, so I hope it's going well for you. But jumping right in, the Atari Jaguar updates are probably the biggest news out of the month of November. For the longest time, the Atari Jaguar core was barely functional and probably ran maybe 5 or 6 games. Again, not a strike against the core, just wasn't really finished up. And while the core definitely still isn't finished, now suddenly we're basically able to play almost every single game out of the Atari Jaguar library. And that was absolutely amazing because even though the Atari Jaguar was not successful, games like Alien vs. Predator, at least in my opinion, are absolute must-plays. And Atari Jaguar hardware, weirdly on the eBay markets, has gotten crazy expensive. You're talking $300 to $500 depending on the condition of the console just to own an Atari Jaguar, and trust me, it really isn't worth that whatsoever. But to be able to play games like Rayman on MiSTer FPGA was just absolutely so much fun. They're not quite running at full speed yet, at least in the instance of Rayman, and saving does not currently work, so you really have to play the game in one setting or basically just use codes to try and get further into a game. But to say that this was a marked improvement on Atari Jaguar performance in November would be an absolute understatement. This is now feeling like an 85 to 95% complete core. Just needs to be a little bit buttoned up, but as I always say, sometimes that last 5 to 10% takes as long as the first 90%. So don't think the next update is going to finish this completely. It might be 6 months, it might be a year until you actually see this core performing exactly like an Atari Jaguar would. But it's always awesome to see updates like this. It really does get me excited for what the future holds. And interestingly enough, a few people thought that the Atari Jaguar core didn't exist and I didn't show it running on a television. Not sure why that is, but I can assure you I'm not making this up. Plenty of people have tested it, but those comments always make me laugh. But it is Thanksgiving, so we'll try to be a little bit nicer moving forward. And honestly, there is a lot of fun to be had on the Jaguar. Stuff like Iron Soldier is great. NBA Jam got an absolutely incredible port, one of the best ways to play in the home. But do remember, as I always say, if you're not playing as John Stockton, you're not playing the game correct. But again, it is just fun to see Atari Jaguar getting some more love. I do like the hardware, it can do some fun things. And I just recently picked up a Kojak arcade board for Area 51, so I can do a little bit of probing and a tiny bit of reverse engineering to help out to maybe see if arcade games would boot on the core. I don't know if anything will come of that, but it is something I am attempting. But the Kojak does use a 68020 Motorola processor versus the standard 68000 in the Jaguar, so there might be some instruction sets that need to be pivoted or added to the core before that could actually work. But it is something I'm looking into because I can't code for half a crap, but I can reverse engineer and look at hardware all day long. That is where my strong suits lie. But if you want to try the most current Jaguar core, go over to MiSTer FPGA Discourse and grab it from the Unstable Nightlies channel. Now moving over to the Sega Saturn, we had a lot of fun updates from SRG 320 this month as well. At the tail end of last month, the interlacing video was fixed over Direct Video 1 mode, so that didn't make it into the October news video because I actually had to run that later on in the day. And if you are using direct video, interlacing should look absolutely perfect now. You're not really going to get any of those jumpy images. Additionally, we got a lot of improvements on the dual RAM side of things with the games running faster, but then SRG 320 came in and gave us an option in the single RAM core to basically push a little bit harder to try to get those same speeds. We also got bug fixes in games like Panzer Dragoon and many other titles like Fighters Mega Mix, and that was fun to see as well. There's definitely still some areas in the Saturn core where there are some visual bugs or games that will not boot yet, but for the most part, again, this is feeling like it is getting close to the finish line. But it's as likely that I'm talking about this next November with updates as it is that it is finished, because the Sega Saturn has a metric crap ton of games in its library, and it's also a very complex piece of hardware, so you kind of have to just wait around for everything to come together, and it might be 4 weeks, it might be 4 months, it might be a year until we have the full release candidate of this core. But it's exciting to go through all of the different updates, talk about all of the improvements, all of the games, all of the bug fixes, and things like the games freezing in the attract loop here. So hopefully in December we maybe get one more update before the end of the year, but December always feels a little bit like a slow month on pretty much everything, including MiSTer FPGA. We got trees to put up, we got gifts to unwrap, we got Hanukkah candles to light, the whole 9 yards, so I'm guessing probably December will be a little bit of a quiet month. but November and October for MiSTer FPGA and Sega Saturn were absolutely epic. It's been so much fun to see all the improvements come into the core, and for so many games you really wouldn't be able to tell whether you're playing on MiSTer FPGA or original hardware, and that is always the goal. You want things to be one-to-one performance, and we're getting there in a lot of titles. Leave me a comment down below and tell me if you've been playing the Sega Saturn core, and if so, what's the one game you've been playing more than any other? I've been doing another run of the ultimate version of Nocturne in the Moonlight, Castlevania, just for November, just so I can kind of revisit that game and see the new updates. Now moving back over to Slamy's CD-i core, we got multiple updates to it as well, and a lot more stability came in with some of the games. Stuff like Hotel Mario here is now just running very close to what it would run on real hardware. And this was the game that would have a lot of loading issues, would throw up some disk errors, even if we were just using files. And I would say that Hotel Mario isn't some sort of hidden gem, but it is a game worth playing on CD-i. And it's not like the CD-i has the most comprehensive library of video games ever, and until one day when the digital video cart comes in, there are some of the best titles that we still can't play, but going through this has been a lot of fun just to experience some of these games for the first time. I've definitely played Hotel Mario before, but stuff like the next game, I just don't understand what the CD-i was ever trying to be, but I love that it's being preserved, and it is a nice thing indeed, because the CD-i hardware is definitely temperamental. It has a real-time clock chip in it, battery-backed RAM, just like a lot of the Konami arcade boards do, so maintaining it and actually keeping it running can be a little bit of a chore, and they definitely aren't the cheapest systems ever, and I feel like for the most part, not many people are interested in collecting for the CD-i, but they are interested in experiencing it, so the core on MiSTer FPGA may be the first time you've ever actually played a CD-i. And that's the great thing about FPGA technology and MiSTer in general, is that sometimes it brings you experiences you've never had before. Even if CD-i Spring Break Pinball here might not be exactly the experience you do want to have, but there are some titles on CD-i that are definitely going to be fun to play in the future, and that's definitely gotten a lot of improvements in the month of November, and we'll just have to wait to see what November offers us. Now moving over to the arcade side of things, WickerWaka released the Irem M90 core, which is basically just an arcade board that plays two types of games, Bomberman and Mahjong. I have no idea how to play Mahjong, and I'm not super interested in learning. What I'm very interested in, if you know me in the channel, is Bomberman games. It is one of my favorite franchises of all time, and the fact that this arcade board has like 4 variants of the same game on it, Bomberman wise, is always going to make me happy. But the game runs incredibly well. You can have more than one player on screen, obviously. It is a Bomberman game, so it was just an awesome gift for the month of November to get this core, and it has an absolutely outstanding soundtrack. So we are late into the video, but here's your sound sample. Go ahead and listen. I'll be right back to tell you a little bit more about what happened in November. The Irem M90 core sounds great coming out of MiSTer FPGA, but it's definitely helped by the fact that Bomberman has some of the best music in all of video gaming. I'd say this is about a B tier Bomberman soundtrack, with Saturn Bomberman and Bomberman Hero being in that A tier. Now keeping with the arcade side of things, RCA Victor Co. released their Konami Bubble System core as well. This is going to be stuff like Twinbee as well as Gradius or Gradius, depending on how you want me to pronounce it, because no one can ever seem to actually agree on how the game is pronounced. I give you both, so I can't be wrong. And this is fun as well, not just because it's got great games on it, but the bubble memory hardware is absolutely super temperamental. Most of the cartridges that actually have the games on them die over time, so actually finding this hardware and collecting for it is not only very difficult, it's also very expensive, and you have to kind of expect that it's going to break at some point in time, just kind of sitting around on your shelf. And that's why FPGA cores are so important for preservation. Sure, you could go out and buy an Atari Jaguar right now in games, you could go out and buy a CD-i with games, you could probably even find a Bomberman arcade board board for the Irem M90 boards, but if you actually want to buy a bubble memory system for Konami, you're going to have to hunt, you're going to have to pay, and they aren't really readily available. They don't change hands all that often, so this is going to be the next best thing to owning original hardware, and because it's not going to break just sitting there like the original hardware, it's probably even better. And honestly, getting stuff like these two amazing shmups is just a fun time, because it's great that we're getting more arcade cores from more people. Obviously, Jotego is really leading the charge along with WickerWaka when it comes to that, but seeing RCA Victorco pop up with another core is always a fun time. The only thing I wish this was doing a little bit better is making Gradius a little bit easier, because this game absolutely always destroys me. It is just mind-maddeningly hard, and I've never actually gotten good at it. You can leave me a comment down below in the comments. Are you good at Gradius, or are you terrible like I am? I would be curious, because it's just one of those games that always hands me my ass when I play it, but I always have fun when I'm experiencing it. Now moving over to the last bit of news we have this month, Mr. Add-on sent me the prototype for Reflex Prism DAC. This is still in active development, hopefully should be out soon, but it's basically a direct video board for your MiSTer FPGA that can also function in a ton of different manners. You basically take the HDMI signal from your MiSTer FPGA in direct video mode and pipe it into Prism, and then you have an analog output there both over VGA as well as the Saturn mini DIN connector at the back, so you can get stuff like RGB, S-Video, component, and the like. And it was a ton of fun to preview this thing, and I think a lot of people are going to enjoy it, because as good as it is as a direct video DAC for MiSTer FPGA in direct video mode, it also has the ability to pass through other digital signals across analog, stuff like Xbox Series X, PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, Nintendo Switch, your PC. Basically, if you can give it a digital video signal that's under 4K, you're going to be able to pass that through on the VGA connector, and if it's a 240p or 480i signal, you can pass it through on that Saturn mini DIN port. And the video was just basically me playing around with my PC, throwing in MAME and other emulation options to get something on my CRT or VGA monitors that normally wouldn't work very easily. So this was an absolute ton of fun to play around with, and I think a lot of people are going to like it for direct video mode, especially with we have the dual RAM Saturn core as well as the dual RAM Jaguar core. I think direct video is going to get a lot more popular in 2025. You can leave me a comment down below and you tell me, are you single RAM or dual RAM now? But that's the news for the month of November. Hope you guys had a great month. I'm going to go sit down now and probably have my Thanksgiving dinner, but all jokes aside, I made this the day before, so the turkey's still in the fridge. I just have to get these things out ahead, so if anything happened in the last 24 hours, I didn't talk about it. But we're done, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.